make sure that those who couldn't join us can be here. So let me start over. Again, this is Coaching Star Stuff, supporting teachers to the moon and back. And today we're going to be using Pear Deck. Pear Deck is a free add-on for Google Slides and for Microsoft PowerPoint presentations. And it basically makes any presentation interactive with a participant group, with the audience. And so I'd like for you to take out your phone or open another tab on your computer, whichever one you'd like. Go to the website, the website joinpd.com. And then there's the code there for you to join this class. DF, Determined Flashlights Notice Acidic Submarine. So if you'll type that code in, then you will be able to follow along with the presentation. And when we get to the portions of the presentation that are interactive, you can use your phone or the new tab that you opened to type in your response. So it's sort of like using the chat box, but it's a little more interactive and it has more features. And again, it's a free add-on that I'm using today with Google Slides. We thought with this conference that not only are we giving you guys content, but we are also trying to model the use of technology. We know we didn't do a great job with that yesterday, but we've made some adjustments. And so hopefully it's working seamlessly for you guys today. I hope you've had a good experience. So I did put that class code for joinpd.com in the chat. So I'm going to close the screen, but if you still need to access it, you can certainly do that. Just go to the chat box and it is there. And as we go through the presentation today, the code is going to stay right up here in the top right corner. So if you get kicked out of Pear Deck, if your connection is lost or whatever, you'll have to re-enter that code, but it will stay right here in the corner as we go along. All right, any questions about Pear Deck before we get started? You can always type in the chat box and I'll be watching that and try my best to respond. Okay. So back in 1985, I was, I think, in the 3rd grade, and it was a very different time in our world, right? Very different from 2020. And you remember Krista McAuliffe and her story and what happened to her with the space quest that we were in the United States. And this is a quote that I found. And as we were preparing these presentations for this conference for you guys with the whole space theme, I came across this and I thought, you know, we really are in a new frontier, just like we were in 1985. We're in a new frontier here. And so it's everybody's business to know about space. And I would relate that to our work by saying it's everybody's business to know about this new frontier and how we can continue to meet the needs of our students. So I just wanted to share that with you because I think that we know times are changing and we know our practice is evolving. And we're all in this together, right? We've heard that over and over and over. In this breakout today, I want to talk to you about what that means for supporting teachers during this time. What will our teachers need and how can we help them? So the next slide is an interactive slide using Pear Deck. So I'm going to remind you, I only have, it looks like 12 participants in Pear Deck right now. It looks like about 8 of you need to join Pear Deck if you can on your phone or on a separate tab. But these are the traditional roles of coaches, of instructional coaches. And you can see them listed there. I'm not going to read them all out to you, but those are the traditional roles. I want you to take your phone or your device and drag your dot. Okay, so everybody has an orange dot. Drag it to the role that you think you currently, or not currently, previously, prior to March, okay, prior to this whole pandemic, where did you spend the most time? Did you spend your time as an instructional specialist, as a curriculum specialist, supporting in the classroom, as a mentor? Like, where do you think you spent the most time? Drag your dot, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. So we're gathering some real-time data from our participants. It looks like we still only have about 12 people joined Pear Deck. So again, I'm just going to remind you as people are dragging their dot, here's the code. Go to this website, joinpd.com. PD stands for Pear Deck. Type in this code, DFNAS. And you too can drag your dot once you log in to Pear Deck. And it may ask for your Gmail account, I think, but go ahead. So you can see here what the majority of the responses are. We just gathered some data, and that's TAP Standard 5, right? Assessment strategies. We did that in real time. Most of the responses are coming down for around classroom support, being an instructional specialist, data coach, providing resources, facilitating professional learning in our buildings. So that's where it's been traditionally, right? But we know that times they are changing. And so we're going to talk today about how our work is different and some ways that we can support teachers. So these are our goals for today. We have 2 goals for this breakout, and we plan to be in this room together until about 2:10 today. And it's about 1:15 now. So we have 2 goals. One, to learn strategies and gain tools for supporting teachers in a virtual environment. And the second goal would be to share questions and advice within a community of learners. One of our goals for this conference was that you guys can network together and learn from each other. And we want you to walk away from this with ideas from your colleagues. And so I'm going to give you some time at the end of this breakout today to talk to each other and share what's been working and what hasn't worked, and some strategies that you tried during the spring online learning time and that you hope to replicate or continue in the fall. All right, so those are our goals. Now let's stop for a minute. Take out your device again, if you will. And you're logged into Pear Deck. It looks like we have 16 people now out of 20 logged in, and I'm one of those 20, so 16 out of 19 in the class now. And I want you to take your phone and type in a response. What do you wonder about coaching virtually? Is there anything about it that scares you? Take just a minute and type that in the chat box. I'm going to give you a minute to do that. And while you're doing that, I'm going to tell you that one of the things about Pear Deck that I like is that there's a teacher dashboard and there's a presentation screen. So just like in a regular Google Slides presentation where you can have presenter view and you can see your speaker notes, Pear Deck has something similar. And so as you guys are typing your response, I can see your name under your response. But when I share it with the class, nobody can see anyone's name, right? So it's a very safe way for your students to respond to your questions without having to have their name attached to it, right? Because sometimes students are afraid to answer. They're afraid of what their classmates are going to think, and so they can respond anonymously. But if you have a knucklehead who writes something he shouldn't write, or et cetera, you can go and you can see that through the teacher dashboard who is typing that. So one of the things that I like about Pear Deck too is it gives you guys a chance to follow along with the presentation and interact. And we know from I know from the reading that I've done during this time for interactive online learning, the new industry standard is that we're supposed to stop every 3 to 5 minutes and let students interact. Because no one, of course, wants to just sit and listen to a talking head, right? So you can see the responses appearing here on the screen in real time. And I'm just going to kind of scroll through these. I love what some of you guys are posting, the grace over grades. How effective will this be? What about buy-in? How do we support those teachers who aren't very strong with technology? How to keep parents and students engaged? How do we support teachers with engaging students remotely? I wonder how to ensure that quality instruction continues, and that's certainly a consideration because we want to make sure that that rigor stays there. How much of an impact will I have? And so you can see all these questions. So we're not alone in this. I think we all can agree that there are significant challenges to overcome in this new frontier. I'm wondering how effective I can be personally. That's somebody being honest there, so good. The level of engagement from teachers. And I would add to this one too, the level of engagement from our students, and then maintaining connections. Good. Thank you guys for commenting in that. Okay, so the next slide on this screen, you can see on the left side of the screen is a list of the traditional roles of the instructional coach, what it has been traditionally, And over on the right are some things that Learning Forward, that organization, says are new things that instructional coaches need to consider. So working as a technology specialist, as a digital buddy, as a motivator, as a guide, promoting risk, and then also being what we call an SEL, or social emotional learning support for your teachers. I think that we really need to run a highlighter over that because of the situation that we're in and how people are responding to this pandemic in so many different ways. And I could have added another bullet here, and any other duties as assigned, right? Because I know that that comes up in your work as well. Ms. Carpenter, no problem. As we model the use of Pear Deck, you can certainly just use the chat box if you need to. That is no problem at all. Okay, so in this new terrain, we are all learning from one another. And I think that that's just important that we keep reiterating that to our teachers and our staff, that it's okay for the coach to learn alongside the teacher, that no one has to be the expert in the content areas, in the delivery platforms. We are all learning in this together. And you know, coaches are in a unique situation where they can go into different classrooms and see neat things that are happening in several rooms, and then they can share what they've learned or what they saw with other teachers. And so I think that that's important to highlight, that we are all learning from one another. So I think that often teachers don't ask for help from their instructional coach because they don't know what kind of help is available to them. It could be helpful to brainstorm a list of ways that you can support your teachers virtually, and then share that list with your staff. This would be like a menu from which they can ask for help. And so in this breakout today, I thought that I would offer 6 strategies to coach virtually. And as I go through these 6 strategies, you'll notice how the traditional roles of an instructional coach, such as resource provider, curriculum and instruction specialist, classroom supporter, and other roles show up in these 6 ways of partnering with teachers. So the first strategy is to provide resources for all subject areas. One area to maybe focus on first is sharing resources for digital learning. As you have your collaborative planning meetings, you can explore various ways that resources that are provided by your school and by your district could be used to support teaching and learning in the units of curriculum that your district uses. Be sure when you share those resources and you provide support that you are that you yourself have been trained on how to use those, and so that you can provide the most effective support possible. The next strategy is to provide feedback on videos and activities that teachers select. There are a few things that you can look for before teachers upload these resources to their web pages, before they use them in their Google Classroom, etc. So you could serve sort of as a screener and give feedback on those. You want to make sure when you're previewing those things that there's an ease of access and that it's accessible for all students. And what that means is that students can complete activities across a range of devices, such as cell phones, tablets, computers. We need to take the time to go through and try these activities out on multiple devices before using them with students, so that you'll know what to anticipate, what problems could come up. As coaches, we can also look for evidence of differentiation, because we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our learners. We can look for things like, is there a read aloud option for our struggling readers? Or are there modifications or accommodations for our students with special needs? Can students respond in multiple ways, such as using a Flipgrid to record a video response, or a video note to record a verbal response, versus always having students write things down? So are they teaching using lots of different modalities as one form of differentiation? One thing that's super important to look at, and we've talked about this in several of the breakouts today, and our panelist earlier today spoke on this, but it's clarity. You know, making sure that the learning target is very clear, just as if we were in a classroom with 4 walls. We would have the learning target or the learning intention posted. we want to make sure that it's just as clear in the online classroom. We want to check to make sure that the teaching point, the learning intention, is explicitly stated, and that whatever the teacher is asking students to do, that there is a tight alignment between the activities, the learning intention, and the standard, just like if we were in a brick and mortar classroom. When we preview resources and provide feedback, those are some things that we can be looking for. So to continue that thought about differentiation, this brings us to our next strategy, and it deals with support staff in our building. Coaches can consult with support staff on differentiating tasks for digital learning. You guys can serve as the conduit or the one who brings those individuals together to partner with our grade level and content teachers. You can work with them to devise plans for differentiating digital learning and on ways to provide individualized instruction. I know several districts are working on personalized learning. And some of our schools even have a grant from GOSA, I think, to be working on that. So that's a way that you can work to support classroom teachers. In this way, teachers will select the content they want to teach, and then as coaches, we can work together to explore digital platforms that support the processes they want to use or the products that they want students to create. For example, if there's a science lesson on electrical circuits, it could have video and audio support for English language learners. Your gifted students can research the presidential process. I'm just throwing out an example. And they could make multimedia poster boards after doing that as a product that they create. So we can work with these different support staff to help them differentiate and meet these needs. The next strategy is to help teachers prepare for asynchronous lessons. And by asynchronous, I mean lessons that are pre-recorded ahead of time or activities that are loaded into the digital classroom that students do not have to be present, like live present, in order to access them. So this would be assignments and things that are available in the classroom when the teacher is not necessarily there or other classmates aren't there. They're available 24 hours a day, asynchronous lessons. And so one of our strategies could be that we could assist teachers with making those pre-recorded videos for asynchronous lessons. So when we go and start assisting with these pre-recorded lessons or videos, we need to be intentional and we need to model lessons just like we would in the classroom. And we heard earlier today, our panelists were talking about modeling and how important that is. I think when we are helping them with these pre-recorded videos, that's a great opportunity to be intentional and to model lessons. We can teach using the gradual release model and try to be very intentional about providing opportunities for students to engage. And we know that that might look different in an asynchronous lesson, that's recorded ahead of time. It may look like stopping in the we do section of the gradual release model, stopping in the we section and asking for a verbal response from students. Even though we know that when you go, now what's the answer to that question? That this is being pre-recorded, and so you don't have a live audience, right? But you're still going to stop and say, now think about the answer. What is the answer? You still want to have that pause in this lesson. You could tell them to turn and talk to a stuffed animal, turn and talk to someone in the family, a friend, whatever is there. We know we can't hear them on the other end, for example, but we still want to give that opportunity because we want to still follow that gradual release model of instructions. So we want to make sure that we are holding true to the intent of our standards and sound instructional practice. So the next two strategies are about co-planning and co-teaching lessons. This sudden and complete switch to digital learning came with a steep learning curve, yes? Many of us had a steep learning curve in March when we were kind of thrown into this, including those of us who support teachers. So to help scaffold that transition to online teaching, we can partner with teachers to co-plan synchronous and asynchronous lessons. And again, your synchronous lessons are going to be those that are live with your students. And so it could be a live Google Meet, where you tell your students to all log in at 2 o'clock and we're going to do a direct instruction lesson on whatever. So as coaches, we can co-teach and co-plan synchronous and asynchronous lessons. That can be on your menu of strategies that you offer to teachers. You can do some team teaching with them using some of those strategies that like team teaching or one teach, one assist. Those are the kinds of things I'm talking about. You can use Google Meet, Zoom, those types of things. So these 6 strategies that I just quickly went through are just suggestions, and this is certainly not a complete list, okay? I'm sure that you could add to this list. When you create a menu like this for your teachers, put your name on it. For example, you could say, Amy can help you in these ways, and you pass it out to them. Really take ownership of it. What I want you to do now is go to the chat box, if you will. We haven't used the chat box yet much this session. In the chat box, I want you to add another strategy that has come to mind as I was going over these 6 suggestions. What's another strategy that you can use to support teachers during this time? Maybe it's something that you've tried already, but type it in the chat box at this time. And I'm going to give you guys appropriate wait time now. I've been talking a lot. Are y'all awake out there? I can't see you. Everybody's got their video off, but are you guys there? Yes. Okay, now I'm seeing some comments. Good. Donna Giles. So using Class Dojo, okay, allowed you to communicate with students to support teachers. Good. What are some other ways? What are some other things that you might could add to this menu of ways that you could support teachers virtually? Anyone? Anyone? Yes. A great suggestion there. Another strategy could be that we model the use of technology with our teachers. So when you have your PLC sessions, your collaborative planning sessions that you facilitate, you can model strategies. And that's one of the reasons why we're using Pear Deck today, just so that I can model the use of that tool for you guys. A Google Doc with a listing of resources, good. Suggesting technology, facilitating a tech expert to come in and model things. Good. And then data. I love that one from Ms. Carter, data. I've used Google to share student data with grade level teachers to help them with their planning. So you can, where it says provide resources for all subject areas, you can provide data, you know, formative data. Playlist lessons, Wakelet. I love Wakelet. So great suggestions there. So what we really want you to be thinking about is, what does your menu of service look like? And when you go back to school in the fall or during pre-planning, are you going to be able to provide them with a list of things that you as their coach can do for them? That's what we really want you to be thinking about. All right. So next, I want us to think about how we will have to shift from providing support for digital tools. And several of you mentioned technology in the chat box, but how are we going to have to shift from providing support for digital tools to now supporting digital pedagogy, okay? We want to take all of those tech tools and now move it into pedagogy. And we can start with our teachers by having them think back to this time last year, okay? So last June of 2019, June, July, August. Last summer, teachers had time to go and set up their classrooms, right? I remember when I was a principal, this was the time of year when teachers were texting me, emailing me, when can we get back in the building? Are the floors done? When can I get back in my room, right? Because they wanted to set up their classroom. Teachers know how important it is to have their room decorated, to have everything set, especially elementary teachers, I'm just gonna say it. They really wanna have everything kind of laid out because we know how important that structure is. You wanna set up your routines, your procedures, and you knew that all of these things had to take place first before learning could happen. So I think as coaches now, we have to remind our teachers that they still have to take that same amount of prep time in their digital classrooms to set up their rules, procedures, etc., and remind them. It is a lot of work because now we're going to probably be setting up a face-to-face classroom and also an online classroom, but they're going to have to put some thought into it and prepare and have it ready for students when they come back. Now I'm going to pause for just a minute because I have a question, I think, in the chat box. Can a Google Doc be created for us, instructional coaches, to add resources and uses of resources for each of us to draw from? That is a great suggestion, Ms. Aldridge. And I think that on the Launchpad, I can certainly suggest that we put something on there, maybe a Padlet. Are you guys familiar with Padlet? We can set up a Padlet perhaps, and you guys can post resources and access it at any time from the Launchpad. So great suggestion, and I will certainly pass that on. Okay, so the next box on this slide, after we've set up our classroom, is to remind our teachers about connections. And this next box talks about connections and how important those connections are now between teachers and students. We can all say that we just spent 2 hours doing an amazing Screencastify lesson, like creating it, but that's not what our students are going to remember. Of course, we know that what they're going to remember is when we took the time to make a connection with them, when we inspired them, when we listened to them, when we gave them hope. That's what they're going to remember, especially during these crazy pandemic times. And then we're going to want to encourage that student-to-student connection. You know, we realized very quickly in the spring that when everything was shut down and everybody was at home, people began to feel very isolated, right? And people dealt with that in different ways. And so as teachers, we want to make sure that we have opportunities for students to collaborate with each other, not just with the teacher. And then there's always that teacher-to-teacher collaboration that's so important. And it can be as simple as you guys as coaches setting up those collaborative planning sessions, setting up collaborative sessions like in Google Meet or Zoom or whatever you have. And really in those sessions, have the goal be for collaboration and keep the cognitive level low, because we don't want to do anything to overwhelm teachers. There's only so much that a sponge can absorb, so to speak. So just to keep that in mind. And then the third box is good teaching is good teaching. And that's what we want to remind our teachers. The language of the standards is not going to change as we move into a hybrid model, an online learning model. Think about those key instructional strategies that worked in a face-to-face classroom. And how can we replicate some of those in an asynchronous or synchronous environment? So we want to focus on engagement, collaboration, meaning making, and quality feedback. Those are things that we want to keep in mind as we're trying to replicate some of the sound instructional practices, because good teaching is good teaching. And I think we need to remind our teachers, you don't have to be perfect. And I would say, give yourself grace. And as coaches, we're going to be here to support you. Yes, and so tell them that it's going to be okay. We're going to learn together. We're going to get through this, and no one is perfect. And that last box is around equitable access. We have to be mindful of our students' needs, availability, accessibility, and abilities in general. And so by that, we mean not all of our students have the same technology availability, technology access, right? I mean, just think about it today, just in this conference, we are all logged in, connected on different types of devices, right? Some of us are on Android, some of us are on iPhones, some of us are on tablets and computers and laptops. And so we all have different needs in terms of accessing this conference. The students are the same way. Some of them are going to have no problem with internet, no problem with access. Some of them are going to struggle. And so we have to consider equitable access when we're shifting to an online learning environment. And with that in mind, I'm going to share with you a resource a little bit later, but I want us to remember how important the connection is between the coach and the teacher. The relationship that you have with your teachers is going to be super critical during this time. So this next slide is Pear Deck, and I want you to pull up your phone again. Some of you may have been kicked out, and if you were kicked out of Pear Deck, the code is right up here in the top right of the screen, DFNAS. But I want you to think about equity in learning. What have been the efforts of your school or your district to overcome this equity issue. You know, we know that not everyone had access to the internet, not everyone had access to devices. So what are some things that your school did or your district did to try to overcome that? I want you to share some strategies here. And as you're typing, I'm going to share with you on the screen so you can see the responses in real time. Great. So we really want to stress with our teachers, how are you going to bring in equity in that synchronous and asynchronous environment? Yes, we want to make sure that teachers are providing opportunities to experience the same lesson that you might have given through a Google Meet. What about those kids who couldn't be there for the synchronous? Is there a way that we can record that and post it in the classroom so that they can watch it later? Okay, so some of the ways that we overcame equity, some strategies: giving out devices, having buses with hotspots strategically placed, having packets, printed packets for students, and they would come and pick those up. Let's see, parents could check out devices, hotspots, laptops, etc. I really think, and this is just Amy's personal opinion, but I really think that one thing, a good thing that's going to come out of this whole situation is universal access to the internet. I mean, I really think you're going to see communities stepping up and providing it across, you know, what do they call that? Like a web where it doesn't have any dead spots across the whole community. I can't think of the name of it right now, but the idea that everyone have access to the internet, I think is probably going to come from this, because we've really seen where pockets of communities in our state even that had very little access, and we had lots of students who weren't able to participate. So recorded lessons that were live for students who had multiple siblings. Okay, so that's a great suggestion there. I like that. Surveying your parents. So good suggestions here. But I think it's something to consider as we move forward, because we want to make sure that we have that equity in access. All right. Okay, so in summary for those types of things, Joanne Killian from Learning Forward, she in a recent webinar shared 4 things that I just wanted to kind of run a highlighter over and share with you. She says that we have to clearly communicate our roles, and that goes back to providing the menu of services that you had earlier of things, and your menu may not look like the menu of the teacher in the building next to you or the building in the district over. It's really tailored to what are your strengths and how can you support your teachers based on what they need in your building. Joanne Killian says that we need to rework our partnership agreements for the new context. And if you've never heard that phrase, partnership agreements, it's basically an agreement between you and your client are your clients are your teachers. So it's just a set of agreements that you mutually arrive at. And it's important to lay out what your expectations are and for you to hear what teacher expectations are for you. So if you're in a Title I school, probably raise your hand. Some of you are in a Title I school. Yes, y'all do Title I compacts where you have to say, this is what the school will do. This is what the teacher will do. This is what the parent will do, right? This is what the student will do. Similar, it's almost like having a compact with your teachers, between the coach and the teachers, but it's called a partnership agreement in Joanne Killian's work. So it's important for you to be very clear about what you can and can't do. I know some of our districts are going to be moving to a hybrid model, and they're going to be in the building some days and at home other days. And so what are your work hours on those home days? How can they reach you? Should they text you? Should they call you? What, you know, like be very clear about what services you can offer and what the expectations are. These are kind of like working agreements. Thirdly, I think it's important, and Joellen brought this up in her webinar, it's really important for us to remember our teachers' cognitive load. And like I said earlier, a sponge can only absorb so much. And so if teachers are not familiar with an online environment, if they've not done this kind of very detailed, very specific, prescriptive, in many cases, work of lesson planning and resource management in an online environment, if they haven't done this before, they are going to be overwhelmed. And so anything that we can do to have grace, to simplify it for them, to lessen the load, so to speak, and to keep that cognitive load very low so that we're not creating more undue stress or fear or anxiety on the part of our teachers, because we know that when they experience those feelings, it gets passed on to our students, right? And we certainly don't want that to happen. So I think we have to be mindful of that. And lastly, she talked about focusing on the present. And what that means is, what do your teachers need at this moment? You know, we've often heard the phrase, what is the best way to eat an elephant? One bite at a time. When you don't know what to do, take one step. You know, just start. So what is the most urgent need that your teachers need at this moment? If we can identify what that is, then we'll know where to start. And I think that would be good. So in just a moment, I'm going to share with you a tool from Joanne Killian's work where she helps coaches use a process called speed coaching to identify what that most urgent need is. I'll share that with you in just a moment. But in the meantime, before we do that, I want to just stop for a minute and get back to this Pear Deck Interactive piece. And let's talk just for a minute about partnership agreements. Take your phone or your device or open the other tab and drag your dot. Do you use the coach-teacher partnership agreements consistently in your school? Do you talk about roles and support, but maybe you don't have clear agreements? Or the third one in the red over there, wait, what is a partnership agreement? I haven't heard of that before today. So let's go through those three. And you can drag your dot to see where you are. Looks like we have about 12 responses, so I'm going to share those with you. Good. And I'm going to put somebody in the hot seat. Whoever drug their dot over to the green, that we use them consistently. Can you turn on your mic for a second and just share with us what that looks like in your school? I think that could be very helpful for our other participants.
So that's me. I'm Sarah Barlow. I'm from Forsyth County Schools, and our coaches sit in all of the PLC meetings that our content's planned together. So they are consistently there trying to figure out ways to help. They're part of the breaking down the standards, what's going on in the classroom, the instructional piece, and then also the resource piece for whatever teachers need. So they are in the thick of it with the teachers.
Ms. Barlow, does your district use a template for partnership agreements?
Not that I've ever seen. I think it's just the culture of how it's been presented in our county.
Okay, very good. Does anybody have questions about that or want to discuss it further? You're welcome to turn your mic on and speak up at this time if you need to or want to. Anybody? Okay, well, if you're not using partnership agreements, I would strongly suggest that you consider it even. And when we did this session yesterday, we had a couple of participants who shared some resources for doing partnership agreements. And so I'm going to post those on the resource page, on the Launchpad page after this. Okay, so there's a question in the chat box. How was this culture started or developed? So can you speak to that, Ms. Barlow?
Sorry, I wish I had a better answer for how it was started and developed. I've been at my school for almost 8 years now, and it's just always been that way. I think it's just the teachers that we work with and our principals have always made it clear that this is how we do business, and you know, we're all here to help each other, and we just share the load together. So I wish I had a more definite answer, but it's just always been present at my school, and that's what I came into.
Great. Okay, I see one dot here that's sort of between the green and the yellow. If this person wants to speak up and share, maybe you have some insight for the rest of the group. Does anyone want to share? Okay, I'm not going to call you out. I can see your name, but I'm not going to do that because this is a risk-free way for you to respond. Miss Barlow, what school are you from?
I'm at Riverwatch Middle School in Forsyth County.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I mentioned that I was going to share a tool with you from Joellen Killian's work. This was from 2016, and she calls this the speed coaching, and you can see the top, the outcomes focused coaching map. I'm going to put a link right now in the chat box to this handout, and so if you'd like to pull that up, it's a file that's in a Google Drive folder. If you would like to pull up the handout and look at it, or you can access it later, but she calls it speed coaching because it can be done in 10 minutes or less. And this is a way for you to capture what is the immediate need in the present situation. We talked about how important it is for us to listen. You know, we're listening to our administrators and their vision for the school. We're listening to teachers, are listening to our students and to parents. We as coaches have to listen to our teachers. What are they saying? What are they not saying? Etc. And so it kind of lays out for you how to have these little sessions with teachers where you start with the opening and go all the way down through the closing and what questions need to be asked. And so you can see the right-hand column, sample probes and invitations, some questions and some prompts even for you to use. And so we want to make sure as we use this tool, and some of the questions will help us do this too, you want to make sure that you check in with that teacher, that you heard him or her correctly, that you've got it right. And then from what you've heard, you can figure out what you're going to do about that immediate need at that moment. And this is a map that can help you stay focused in those very brief moments with teachers. You can put it in front of teachers at the beginning of the year and say, you know, this is going to be our speed coaching template, so to speak. Joellen says that she's used it with lots of coaches and they've used it with teachers, and she's even had some teachers tell her that they've started using this in conferences with kids. So as you're conferencing, for example, with students about writing or whatever you're conferencing about, what they're reading, etc., that these can evolve into feedback conversations with kids, which I think is pretty powerful. It can also be used for formative assessment conversations. So I just wanted to share that tool with you. So when we're listening to teachers and when we're trying to understand where they are and what they need, like what is the most urgent need, I think in order for us to support teachers and help them evolve in their practice, that we need to really consider the stages of concern. And this comes out of the work of the concerns-based adoption model, CBAM, concerns-based adoption model. The stages of concern basically are the feelings and perceptions that educators experience with new programs or practices. Okay, so as they are introduced to new things, new programs, new directives, you know, from central office, whatever it may be, whenever they encounter something new that they're required to do, this is a continuum. It's a progression of feelings and perceptions that they experience based on research. And so perhaps when you went through your training to be an instructional coach, you came across this, maybe not, but basically it begins with awareness at the bottom. What is this new thing? Okay. And it goes all the way up the continuum to the top to refocusing. And then there's all different kinds of levels in between. So how do you know where your teachers are on this continuum? I would say that it's through listening to them. I would say that that's probably the most important strategy in your tool bag, is to listen to what they say, listen to what they don't say, listen to what they say to each other in the hallway, in the mailroom, in the copy room. What do they say to you one-on-one? What do they say to you in a group, in PLC? We first have to identify the feelings and the perceptions that they experience when they're faced with something new. So where are they right now? And as we listen, you can figure out, okay, are they in the I'm in the stressed out stage? And if so, how do we respond to that? You know, once we identify where they are on this continuum, then what do we need to do? Do we need to provide resources for them? Do we need to model for them? Do we need to just collaborate with them to plan a lesson? You know, based on what we hear and where they are on this continuum, that's going to indicate what kind of support that we can provide. Maybe they're at the consequence stage right here of, is it worth it? Is it working? And they're ready for coaching conversations, and you can really have a great conversation with them. Or maybe we need to listen for the silences. What are they not saying? What questions are they not asking? Because if they're not asking questions, are they engaged with it, or have they just done like a lot of teachers will do, this too shall pass, right? And so you want to really listen for that. And I would probably throw another item on this, and it's that social emotional learning piece that I mentioned earlier. I would really listen for that self-care and really be an advocate for giving each other grace during this time. So I would encourage us to tell our teachers to give themselves grace, give your students grace, give their families grace, give your colleagues grace. Go outside and go for a walk, take care of yourself, do what you have to do, because we all need grace for this. So I think the beauty of this is that as we listen to our teachers, patterns are going to emerge. And so as a coach, we're listening and we're hearing that, you know, it is the technology that's tripping up some people. It is clarity that needs to be addressed, or it is differentiation, you know, how to differentiate in a virtual environment. And so as you listen and you identify these patterns, then you can decide what PL to offer for your teachers in their upcoming PLC sessions. Y'all with me so far? Okay. It's hard when I can't see you. It's a little different. Okay, so priorities. We want to make sure that there's accessibility, okay, that we have as much equity and access as we can, synchronous and asynchronous, that we address social emotional needs of our students and our teachers. We want to make sure that that academic rigor remains there. Just because we've moved to the virtual format doesn't mean that the learning targets change or that the success criteria change. The expectation is still that the rigor is present. And then finally, are our students still receiving quality, consistent feedback, and are our teachers getting quality, consistent feedback as well? So just things to consider. So I do want to talk again about social awareness, and we've got about 15 minutes left. I want to just wrap up with this. I thought we could transition now to this idea of social awareness and how our role as coaches we know is changing. But the role of the teacher is changing too. And so I think we need to keep in mind that we are all experiencing this pandemic differently. There's a range of responses. As instructional leaders, we have to be ready to listen and respond in ways that are supportive, caring, and helpful. You know, you're going to have students who are going to be fine with it, and you're going to have students who you may not even expect to have struggled who are going to struggle. And you just never know how people are going to respond. And so I think we have to be aware of that. I wanted to share this poem with you. It's called Love in the Time of Coronavirus. And maybe it will kind of spur some thoughts about empathy and about how we need to be supporting our teachers during this time. Today we stockpile empathy. We supply love and good energy. We sing to each other across buildings. We say, I love you through social distancing. Do you know that writing letters to our friends is back in fashion? And that we finally have time to read more books, whether historical or fiction. My cousin told me that she hadn't seen such a blue sky in her city before. My uncle went on his first walk in the woods. He heard a bird sing since the first time he went to war. Even in sickness, this world is allowed to be beautiful, and we are still allowed to love it, for there is always room for hope. This is just me checking in, sending you the moon as a poem, praying and wishing for us all a speedy recovery. And if nothing else, there will always be poetry. We will always have poetry. I love that. And as a former English teacher, of course, I love poetry too. But I just thought that really captured the essence of this whole idea of, yes, our world is changing. And yes, there's a lot of negativity out there. But there's also a lot of love out there. And there's a lot of good things happening. And so I think we should just remember that. Somebody put this in the chat box earlier, and I thought, well, part of this in the chat box earlier, and I just wanted to share it with you. Brad Johnson, I got to know him back in 2005. We were graduate students together at Georgia Southern, and now he's a published author, and he's like a Twitter famous person, and that he writes a lot about supporting teachers. And his quote here to me is significant. Relationships before rigor, grace before grades, patience before programs, and love before lessons. And I just think it's so important for us to remember that as we think about going back to school in the fall, working with our teachers, especially in light of the recent announcement from the Department of Education that there will be no milestone this upcoming year, and that TEKS is not going to be, TEKS will be there, but there's going to be no accountability behind it. So I thought it was especially timely for that. Perhaps in this upcoming year, we can slow down a little bit, take a breath, focus on our relationships with our teachers, have grace with our teachers, with our students, with our coworkers, have patience with each other, and above all, begin to love again, what we do. So as we near the end of this breakout session, I want to show you a short film about empathy. And I think now more than ever, we need to have empathy for those around us, for those with whom we work, and for those in our community. So I want us to watch this short film, and then I want us to consider the implications for our practice. And I'm crossing my fingers that it's going to work. And that if you cannot hear the sound, I need you to tell me in the chat box in just a second. Can y'all hear the sound? No sound. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, wait. If you cannot hear the sound, I'm going to reshare my screen. It is set up to share the sound. I don't know what's happening. So I'm going to start this over. Let's try it again. Let me rewind it. Tell me if you can't hear it in the chat box. Okay, I'm going to try something else. Hang on just a second. Stay with me. Y'all, I'm sorry. This worked completely fine yesterday when I did it, and now it's not wanting to cooperate. I'm going to try one more time.
Is this the real?
I love that. I hope that you were able to see it finally. I just love that it's a short film that got all kinds of awards. It is really a cute little story about empathy, because we never really know what other people are going through, right? I mean, you know, sometimes we see the duck paddling on the surface, but we don't know what's going on underneath. And I think we really need to keep that in mind as we go along and we head back to school, whatever that might look like. I just think it's going to be so important to know, to understand that we can't know everything and we can't know what people are going through. And we just need to have patience and grace. And thank you guys for having patience and grace with me as I went through that with you guys. That is the end of our presentation today. Do you have any questions for me? Any questions? You can turn your mic on. Yes, Caroline, I will share the presentation on the Launchpad under this breakout. And so you can use it with your staff, do whatever you need. And I will find those resources that were shared yesterday in this breakout, and I will share those also with you. I'll put them on the resource page. So I hope that today was better. I hope that you had a good experience today. I hope it has been beneficial and helpful for you. And here at RESA, we are planning lots of other sessions, and I hope that you will go to our webpage and check those out and come back and see us again soon. Yes, we will have recordings for all of the sessions, even the ones from yesterday where we had the breakout 2 was where the problem happened yesterday. And we have recordings from those, and from the Walton group. That group recorded their lesson yesterday, their breakout, and sent it to us. And so we're going to post it on there. So every session that was advertised, the recordings will be available for you. So I appreciate you all being here today. Thank you for the nice comments. The background. Okay, so you can go in Zoom to where your video is, the little panel screen where it says stop video. You can little drop down right beside it, and it says choose virtual background, and you can change your background. So I found this picture on the web of this, you know, in space, and I thought, since this was a space theme, I would be in space talking to you guys today. So that's how you find that. Yes, I will send the links via email. Yes, you will get an email from Middle Georgia RESA PL department telling you that all the resources have been loaded to the Launchpad. So we won't send separate emails for each breakout, but they'll all be posted on that one site. So thank you for your nice comments. I appreciate it very much. It has been stressful for us, you know, jumping out into this virtual and to offer this for you guys, but we appreciate you being here. And I hope you have a great rest of the day. Thank you. Bye.